Hi, everyone. Welcome to the What About Grief podcast. I'm Larry Holm. Today, my guest, Tim Scanlan, and I are going to share some of our own experiences with grief following the death of our spouses, something I'm sure neither of us ever thought we'd be discussing at this point in our lives. To be honest, it feels almost impossible to try to describe what living with my grief on a daily basis is like. The one thing I can tell you is that every day is different. Some days my grief is reasonable and I think, okay, I've got this. And then there are the days when it has the ability to completely take me down, leaving me gutted. You might have heard grief described as coming in waves, and that rings true for me as I approach the 5-year mark of losing my wife, Sarah. The various types of waves are all there. Turbulent waves, tidal waves, maybe some rogue waves, and then smaller ones that wash up on me, but I feel are manageable. How does one narrate the loss of a spouse and how it touches every aspect of your life? Touches your identity, your purpose, your future, but most of all, your love and deep longing for that person to still be with you. Part of trying to comprehend this new life includes questions. So many questions. Questions like, am I moving forward or am I stuck? Should I take a leap forward in some areas of my life? When I laugh or I'm enjoying life, why do I feel guilty at those times? What's a good way to deal with the loneliness? Why do I feel jealous of people who have what I lost? And are people judging me? And do I even care if they are? No matter who you have lost in your life, a spouse, a friend, parent, coworker, I do know you are not alone in your feelings, questions, and confusion. That's why it's important to talk about it with others who can relate to what you are going through and help you navigate your grief. As I mentioned at the top, Tim Scanlan is my guest for this episode, and we're going to discuss the loss of his wife, Holly, back in 2012, and whether our journeys with grief have been at all similar and what we've learned so far from them. Tim and I are similar in many ways besides sharing that label of widower. We both worked at ESPN. We both still are working in the sports industry, where Tim is a vice president of sports broadcasting at Octagon. And we're still trying to figure out how to move on and understand our grief. But maybe most importantly, both of our wives are from the great state of Minnesota. So with that, let's jump in. Tim Scanlan, welcome to the podcast.
Larry, thank you so much, and it's an honor to be here.
Let's begin by kind of rewinding and tell us about your late wife, Holly. Kind of paint a picture for us.
Holly and I met in the town that I grew up in, which was Cottage Grove, Minnesota. And I remember when she moved to town, I was in high school, and originally she was going to go to another high school, but there was a rezoning that took place in this growing community of Cottage Grove. And we met there, and I was struck by her beauty and her personality immediately. We did not date. She was actually seeing someone while I was a senior in that high school. And then and all throughout my freshman year at the University of Minnesota, she was a year behind me, by the way. She was dating somebody, and then found out she was going to come to the University of Minnesota. I met with Holly and my sister on St. Patrick's Day, and we connected, we hit it off. We were at a bar in St. Paul, and that started this romance that went on for about 4 years and then got married in 1986. And she was always the one that supported me, Larry, always encouraged me in this career that can be difficult and challenging and requires a lot of patience. And then obviously the travel that was associated with it. I landed a job at WCCO, and Holly was there to, encourage me to go for this Minnesota Twins producer job. And I told her, I said, it's going to require that I'm on the road for every game because there is no backup for myself. And at the time, and she said, well, let's do it. It's like, this is what you've always wanted to do. So that led to this lifestyle, the family kind of growing up and living with someone that works in the sports media industry.
Yeah.
And I remember there were some years there I was doing the Twins, the North Stars, and the Timberwolves, and University of Minnesota sports.
Oh my gosh.
So one year, Larry, I think I did over 200 events in a calendar year,
Unbelievable.
which is just enormous. If you think back, like that was too much. And, um, either really poor management on my team's part or, or just blind ambition on mine. I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but
Yeah.
anyway,
And you were young.
Holly was, yeah, Holly worked briefly in insurance, but she was this amazing person that could organize our family. We had we quickly grew into 3 kids in 10 years time. From that point, from 86 to 92, we had 3 kids, and so she was juggling all of that while I was working for I worked some freelance for ESPN, some freelance for Raycom. CBS hired me for the Olympics, and then I was doing all of that for Midwest Sports Channel. Um, and then in '96, ESPN hired me to become the coordinating producer for Major League Baseball. So I said, "Look, it requires a move to Connecticut." Both of us did not know anyone here in Connecticut, and I'm still here, by the way.
Yeah.
And so it was an adventure that we took together. So we were really teammates as much as romantic partners, husband and wife. We were great teammates because we understood the importance of each other in this relationship. She gave up her career in insurance in St. Paul to make this move with me. I did tell her we're moving to the insurance capital of the world, but again, we didn't know anybody, so we kind of lost our network at the time. And it was like I would go into the Bristol campus for a 10-hour day, and she was here with the 3 kids trying to get to know everyone in the neighborhood and manage life. So she was always involved in the community. I'm making this, probably I can speed this up, Blair, but she was involved in the community and everything that our kids were involved in, whether it was Little League baseball for my 2 boys, soccer or basketball for my daughter, the school PTA meetings that she would do by herself. She was really involved in the community and really well loved by everyone. And she had deep friends that she met here and from back home in Minnesota. So when she got sick, it was a struggle for all of us. And Larry, I don't know, in 2010, I don't know if I ever told you this. In 2010, she went in for some we thought was minor surgery, and in the middle of that surgery, it was December 31st. So it was New Year's Eve, and we thought we'd be home that night, and maybe even having a small group of friends over for just a quiet New Year's Eve, and or I'm sorry, it was December 30th. And we thought we'd have friends over on the 31st, and in the middle of the surgery, the doctor came in and said, into the family area and asked for me and asked me to step out. So I thought, okay, something's not right. And then he asked me if she'd ever had her appendix out. And I said, no, I don't think so. I've known her since high school. And I don't think, yeah, she's never talked about that. And he said, okay, we can't seem to find it, but we'll come back. And then he came back very quickly after that and said, handed me a card and said, this is an oncologist. I want you to call that person. And your wife has stage 4 appendiceal cancer. And I'm thinking, wow, I wasn't even processing that. Her family was calling me. My kids were calling me. They were in college at this time now, asking, how's everything going? How's mom? How's Holly? And then, I had to talk with the surgeon and the doctor to say, do I tell her when she wakes up? And they said, it's totally up to you. Like, you have to decide as their husband and partner, do you tell them what they're facing? And I said, I can't, being dishonest with her.
Right.
She woke up and she saw the look on my face and she knew something was wrong. And that Larry was the start of my grief right there. I knew my life and our life was not going to be the same. And it just changes you. It, like, in a minute, a million things go through your mind, and you think the best, but you also know that the outcome of anybody in stage 4 is really, really challenging. And the type of cancer she had, the life expectancy was less than 2 years. And, it's basically what we had with her was just less than 2 years. So I tell people that my grief really started at that moment. And I started going through the day and not being myself at work. worried about her and what the chemo was doing to her. And was there any hope of like overcoming this? In terms of grief, Larry, and I know you understand this, that it starts when you know that things aren't going to be the same and you better prepare for it. In many ways, that grief may have helped me deal with the last 3 months of her life because she came home on palliative care. ESPN allowed me the space and time to take care of her in that 3 months. And Holly and I got the chance to talk about what our life was going to be like after she was gone, which were some really sad. And, you can imagine it's like, I didn't want to talk about it, but I knew I had to. So, just asking questions about where would you like to be buried or cremated or whatever. And I think back to that and I think I was probably fortunate that I had that opportunity to talk to her. But what an opportunity that is. It's not like something you look forward to, right? So
I can kind of understand what you're saying about those last 3 months where you had discussions with her about life after her and wanting to hear her thoughts about that, because that's kind of one of the regrets that I had, because I really wanted to put on a good face for Sarah, but inside I had these questions, and I wish now and I regret that I didn't talk about some of these questions with her. I did a few, but not probably as much as the two of you did. And I bet you look back now and are so thankful that you spent that time talking about some very hard things.
it was priceless. It was, just 3 months that seemed to go by so fast and yet were eternity at the same time. So she passed on November 19th. And, think about grief. That night I knew she was no longer hurting, but I also knew that I would never hear that laugh or voice again.
Mhm.
And it was like devastating. My kids and I huddled that night, laughed, cried, did it, but going to bed, trying to go to sleep that night was almost impossible,
Yeah.
because it's just like, what do you do at that point? You're like, your partner's gone and you've got all this stuff to plan for. Nobody ever tells you that. Like,
Yeah.
that you've got an obituary to write, a funeral to plan.
The business of death.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
the funeral home that I worked with was so helpful to me because they really stayed in touch with me, but took care of so many things for me. And I ended up having to do 2 funerals, Larry. You can imagine that one was sad enough. It was in Connecticut, but Holly was from Minnesota.
Right.
And I knew many of her family and friends could not be with us in Connecticut over a week's time, from her passing to, I think the funeral was on November 27th.
You mentioned that you have 3 kids, and I was just kind of wanted to circle back to them. And did you feel like you had to focus on them and their understanding of what happened to Holly before you could try to cope with your own grief? Did you feel like you had to put the dad hat on and make sure that they were okay and see you
Yes.
maybe as strong versus and put your grief in the back seat?
Larry, you know it because you've been through it, and that's exactly what happened. I assured them that in one of my conversations with Holly that we talked about the 3 of them and that I would always have them going forward. And I assured her that you will see all of their accomplishments and firstborns or weddings and their life through my eyes going forward. So I told the kids that. I just said, look, I'm here for you. You guys, this is not going to be easy. Mother's Day, which is coming up, is not, it hits differently on children of lost moms in particular, or Father's Day for dads. So it's, for anybody out there listening, be mindful of that for kids that don't have a mom or don't have a dad. Just that reminder that, hey, we think about you. We think about you not being able to celebrate this day with somebody.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I literally had to put that dad hat on, get the funeral managed, and then think about the Minnesota one at the same time. So I was trying to plan both, and it was lining up flights, securing a facility for a reception after the one in Connecticut and after the one in Minnesota. It's almost like the business of death, Larry, as you called it, pushes you through that that initial moment of loss, because you have to think about those things because very few people are, or if you're grateful to those that have friends, and I had family that were helping me on both sides. So, but it does kind of mask your grief. And I remember my youngest son, Connor's friend, he was a little blunt. He said to me, Mr. Scanlan, I noticed you didn't cry at Holly's funeral in Connecticut. And why was that? And it hit me hard because I thought, that's interesting that he even was that perceptive or would notice that. And if the church was full, it was George Bodenhammer and Norby, and all these ESPN people were there. But again, I think my mindset was like, just manage the day, and make it special for her, make it special for her family, her kids, her friends, and really try to celebrate her life. I've said that to the kids too. Her passing date should really be a date we recognize and do something for others in her name.
That's pretty special.
To not let it become this, to not let it become this timeline that's going to remind you or sneak up on you and hurt you, So
for me, you talk about the business of death. For me, it was after we had a service on one day, and the next day we had a burial for Sarah at the cemetery, and it was just her family and my family. And then I was like, I got to get out of here. I want to be alone. So, and I've mentioned this before on some other episodes, I went back down to Chicago and had lunch outside on Rush Street by Gibson's. And the waitress said, how many? And I said, one. And that's when it hit me that now Sarah was gone. I didn't feel like she was gone while we were doing the quote unquote business of death, because I felt like she was out of town and I was just busy doing things to get, maybe that producer mentality of getting the show on the air. When I sat down and that waitress handed me one menu, that's when it hit me that Sarah was not around anymore and my life had drastically changed and my grief started. And that was probably like one of the worst moments in my life. And that's when grief just took over and I had to just figure out life without Sarah. So I guess, when did you kind of realize Holly physically was gone from your life, and did you break down? Did you just lose it kind of like I did?
A couple of things happened right after Holly's passing. I decided to go back to work just to try to normalize because I didn't know what to do, Larry. I didn't really know. I didn't want to sit at home by myself. And my kids were here, but they were all working. So they were all, but I thought I need to try to make my life normal so I'm not swallowed up in this the way I feel. And I went to work on December 14th of 2012. But the moment I first felt alone, Larry, was probably that New Year's. I was invited to a party and it was all of our friends. So it made it special for me. And I felt, okay there. But it was when I came home and it was just the dog and me.
Yes.
And it wasn't New Year's yet. And I realized, man, it's like your table for one.
Right.
Something to add to that, Larry, my first trip as an ESPN employee after the passing of Holly was the Super Bowl. It was in New Orleans. And Holly and I had a wonderful trip to New Orleans while she was battling chemo in the last year of her life in 2012. It was that May, the Jazz Fest. She really couldn't go to anything, but we traveled and we had friends there. But we tried to go have lunches. She was having a difficult time even having lunch or eating anything. So, but I went to all the restaurants that we went to on that trip and looked at the tables, hoping to find her. I don't know what was going through my mind, but I went to like 4 or 5 different places that we had been to and remembered exactly where we sat. That was kind of my way of like looking for her and also, coming to grips with what I was going through. So I know that feeling all too well.
I can kind of relate to that because when we moved from Orlando to Connecticut to Stamford with Golf Channel, she started attending Sloan Kettering and some PT areas and restaurants. And when I would go back to Stamford after moving here to Chicago, I would always do the same thing. I would drive by Sloan Kettering and, oh, we parked here and she was here in this spot, with me, or we went to this
Yeah.
restaurant, and all those, you're trying to connect with your loved one. So I can totally relate to that experience that you had in New Orleans.
Yeah. Even the memory of the loved one is like, it brings you some peace that you're looking at these places where you were together. Yeah, Holly started at Sloan Kettering. And so I remember walking home with her when we met with this surgeon. There was a last chance shot to save her with this procedure that was just coming into practice at that time.
Hmm.
But it was really invasive and it was going to be very dangerous. But we met with the surgeon and he said to us, I don't advise this. It's so your cancer is beyond the point where I can do anything about it. And if I do this, you won't be on chemo for 3 months and you have a greater chance of, passing on the table. So walking home with her that day was just like so crushing. And we were staying in, up by Central Park. So we walked, as Larry, from that Midtown Sloan Kettering all the way. But that walk was so long and we were quiet together. And, she was the one that picked me up. She said, you really wanted that more than I did. I don't even know if I wanted that.
Interesting.
I said, of course I want that. I said, I'm looking for any chance here. You would understand this as little things pop up. Like you'll open a drawer and the handwriting on a note is there. Or you find something in a box that the two of you knew. And so that still happens to this day. Here I am. So, almost 13 years out and 14 years out. And, it still comes up. It's still, the grief will hit you. And you said it in the open, it comes as a wave.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I'm happily involved with another person, that wave still hits you. And that was a life that you lived before and so different from the life you're living now, but it connects you forever. So.
You're listening to the What About Grief podcast. We will get back to the conversation in a moment, but I wanted to remind you that you can write to us at the show with your thoughts, ideas, or a description of your own grief journey. We appreciate hearing from you and we like being connected with our listeners. So please reach out to us via email at whataboutgriefpod@gmail.com. Also, if you like the podcast and find it helpful, please go to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating. Hit the subscribe button and leave a review. All of this helps us grow the podcast and helps new listeners find the show. And share the link with those who are experiencing their own grief. The goal of the podcast is to help those like us navigate the confusing emotion that is grief. So you brought that up and I wanted to get into that. The $1 million question that we all get when a spouse passes is, after some time, people start to ask that question. So are you dating? Do you want to date? You think you're going to get married again? And, there's that awkward silence. You're wondering how to answer. Is it any of their business? I'm sure you got that. And I'm wondering
100%.
I get it. So I'm wondering, just as a single man and someone wondering what my future holds, but how did you deal with that question? And then also kind of tell us where you are at.
Larry, great. It's a great question. It's an obvious question, right?
Yeah.
But it's a great one still. I was the same as you. I thought, I can't even think about that after Holly passed, and even the year after, with my kids. I kind of threw myself into work with ESPN. I was in the talent office at the time, so I had been moved out of production. So I was trying to reinvent myself as this talent executive. So ironically, that led to this career that I'm in now, right? So,
right.
But so I was going through that, and people would ask, "Will you ever date again?" And I said, "No, I see myself just traveling and taking care of my kids and hopefully grandkids, and I've got a big Catholic family from Minnesota that I'm not hurting for. I can go see people."
Right.
So I didn't need attention. I didn't need companionship at that time. And so I wasn't really looking for it. But I met Megan, as I told you, at JFK. You started talking, and she was from Minnesota. She had watched the Minnesota Twins games growing up, which I had produced. So that kind of connected us. And it was somebody that I could start calling and having coffee with or having lunch with, and would share exactly what I'm telling you right now. And we really bonded over that, the loss, and just became great friends. Where I give credit to Holly for being able to meet someone and to again fall in love with somebody. It was because of our great marriage and our strong teammateship, I guess. I'm not saying that right, but I think it was because of the very great relationship that we had, that it gave me the strength and the confidence that I wanted to find somebody else to give that to or share that with. So, to this day, if you came to my house, Holly's pictures are everywhere. And Megan's been with me here since 2016. Her friends would always say, "Does that bother you that Tim has pictures of Holly up?" And she said, "Absolutely not. That's so much a part of his story, part of the family story, part of my story."
Yeah.
That they need to be up. People need to know and see that. So, that I tell people that, but I give true credit to my relationship with Holly, that I was able to find it again and move on. I wasn't looking like you. You kind of like go through life, but maybe you stumble into somebody in a public place or wherever, and that leads to this situation.
Yeah. Organically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there ever, well, one, I totally agree how special Megan must be to understand that Holly is still so much part of you, and your relationship with her continues on like mine does with Sarah, even though physically they are not here with us. So that's really special that she understands that, and what a great, great person.
No doubt. Larry, do you still have conversations with Sarah in your mind, or Sarah, like if you're out?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I do too. I
Yeah.
still will have like thought conversations with Holly and both my parents.
Mhm.
It helps me keep them in my life from a mental and a spiritual standpoint, but also it helps me make decisions and make
Oh, totally.
um,
Yeah.
choices. So
Yeah, like, Larry, relax. You're so nervous. All these things that Sarah, would tell me in life, like, calm down,
yeah,
enjoy the moment. Why are you
it's only
stressed out over
TV.
this? It's only TV. Yeah. No one knows the format at home, so just relax, right?
Nobody
Um,
cares. 5
no,
days from now,
and no one
nobody will
cares.
care about this telecast.
Exactly. There's this great graphic that was built. You know,
It
um,
showed up upside down, but nobody cared.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I do. I totally have conversations with her. I'll hear her calming me down, or giving me a piece of
It's so
advice.
therapeutic. It's
It
so
is.
therapeutic to have that,
Yeah,
right?
no, you're right. You're totally right. You know, how would you give advice, or what would it be good for people to know or understand about being a widower?
I would look for support in different places. Of course, you're going to have it from family and friends
Mhm.
and the community at large. But I I joined a men's a group of men that had lost their wives at the church that I was going to at that time, and I'm still a member of that church, but I haven't been back in a while. And they were very helpful. The first couple of meetings, I was one of the youngest guys there at the time, and they had gone through what you and I had gone through, and they were probably at the stage where we are now. So I was fresh, having lost her. I think I went to that first meeting in March of 2013. But that group of guys, to this day, I see them, whether it's in the grocery store or at church or somewhere else, and it's an acknowledgement that you feel so grateful that they were there for you,
Yeah.
and they shared their wisdom. So I by reaching out and meeting people and having those conversations, especially with people that have lost someone, it really helped me deal with the loss of Holly, and the lack of not being able to hear her voice, and the million
Yeah.
things that you didn't get a chance to do or say with them, so there's a grief there that goes with that too, and a guilt, Larry. But by talking with people, they've helped me to overcome that and to live the life that that person would want you to live. And I'm sure Sarah would be so proud of you today on who you've become, this podcast, and what you do for people. That's amazing. So, hats off to you. And I'm sure a lot of the credit goes to Sarah.
Yeah, no doubt. I do give her the credit. I think she's probably thinking from above, how the hell are you a podcast host talking about grief? But this is my way to honor her and help others, to your point, and just kind of have that community, because grief is a tough subject to talk about, and we all will experience it probably numerous times in our life. And I wanted to, I do this podcast in a way to honor Sarah. I wanted you to tell us how you honor Holly through the Holly Scanlan Foundation.
Oh, thank you, Larry, for bringing that up. We model the foundation after our family, which was families that are going through this battle, whether it's a patient or a family member, that there's a college-age student or a high school student that is, has hopes and dreams. And fortunately, I was in a position where I could manage the cost. And it was not easy, but I was in that position because of my career. And we thought about all the families that don't have that their kids would have likely had to drop out or make adjustments in their own, academic pursuits. So we thought, why not launch a foundation in Holly's name? And I talked to her about it, and she didn't want it in her name. She said, no, true to her form, she was always wanted somebody else. She said, call it the Scanlan Foundation. I said, no, people will, you were the one that made the impact here in our community. So
that must be a Minnesota trait, because Sarah never wanted anything named in her name either. So hats off to the Minnesota people. Yeah.
I think you're right. So in November of 2013, almost a year after she passed, we launched it. And the first donation we received was from the Jimmy V Foundation.
Wow.
And it was from George Bodenhammer's good friend, Harry Rhodes. Harry called me and said, I'm going to send you this check. And I was so humbled. And, Harry was so good for me, by the way, because he had battled cancer, and we talked about being the caregiver and all that. So Harry was still, somebody that I'll never forget.
I met him last year at the Jimmy V event here in Chicago that I attended and
so
spoke with him. Great guy.
Cool.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. And really shares his story with everyone. But Harry made that donation, and we were off and running. We learned a lot. To be a national foundation, you have to be registered in all 50 states. We were just a family-run organization. I have a few of our friends. So we decided to just focus on Minnesota and Connecticut, the two places where Holly lived and made a huge impact. So we've given over $500,000 in scholarships. We give two $5,000 scholarships each in Minnesota and Connecticut every year. And Larry, to read these, we ask each one of the applicants to submit a personal letter explaining their story. And the need is so great. And it was my son, Connor, came to me and said, Dad, you have to give something to everyone that applies. And I said, we're not that big. It's not a big account. But we did. We changed the format. We now reward all applicants who apply for it in Minnesota or Connecticut. Some either $500 if they don't get it, or $5,000 if they're deemed that they were the most needy or whatever the situation was. So
unbelievable.
But we call them Holly Scholars. And I still get I got an email the other day from a woman who had taken care of her at Smilo. And it was so nice to just get that email. It was like a hand from the past. It was her reminding me I'm okay. So
yeah. What a great way to honor Holly. And I'm sure she is so proud of all of you and all the students who are connected through the scholarship. So that's really cool. And you've given a lot of great thoughts and advice for us who have lost a spouse. And I just was wondering, as we wrap this up, through it all, what do you still miss most about Holly after all of these years?
I miss her laugh. I miss the way our sense of humor together. I miss that laugh the most. And I can sometimes hear it. I hear it in my mind for sure. And I miss sharing like successes with her. Those two things, the laugh and being able to say, hey, how about Ryan or how about Megan, and what they accomplished or who they've become, So
Yeah.
it's, and those are part of the conversations that I talked to you about, that I still have those conversations.
I agree. Yeah, there's so much to miss. Well, Tim, I want to thank you for introducing us to Holly and her story and your story. They say guys really don't express their emotions, and we always kind of clam up. But I appreciate this because I haven't really talked to a whole lot of men who have lost their spouse, and I appreciate and value your words and your experience. And I think this will be beneficial for all who listen, but maybe just a touch more to us guys who have lost a spouse and maybe don't know how to express it or go down the road that's ahead of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Quickly, how do people find out about the Holly Scanlan Foundation? Is there a website?
Yeah, there's a website again, it's Minnesota and Connecticut, but it's the hollyscanlanfoundation.org.
We'll for sure put that website in the notes on the podcast. So thank you again, Tim.
Larry, thanks.
I'd like to close this episode on words that I feel so reflect what it's like once a loved one has died. It's written by Donna Ashworth, and I'd strongly recommend following her on Instagram if you are on social media and dealing with grief. The reading is titled Before and After, and it goes like this. You may find that you begin to measure your life before and after they left. And that's okay. Just be sure whatever you do, whatever tiny grain of strength you have left, that you strive to fill up the after as richly and as beautifully as they helped you fill the before. The before is committed to memory now, but the after is totally up to you. Make it count. Remember, if you are living with grief, you are not alone. My thanks to Tim Scanlan. What About Grief is available monthly on all major podcast listening platforms. Please follow the podcast as well as rate and review the show on Apple Podcast. The executive producer of What About Grief is Marsha Anderson. Logo artwork was designed by TED Studios. This episode was recorded at BAM Studios in Chicago. And lastly, feel free to email us at whataboutgriefpod@gmail.com.